All right, welcome everybody to the first, I think, ever argument cross-class public debate that we've had. I've been really excited about this. I think it's turned out really well. I'm excited for what the debaters are going to have to present to you today. And I thank you all for spending your time to come and participate in the debate with us. The topic for today's debate is that the University of Pittsburgh should implement an academic Bill of Rights that bans viewpoint discrimination against its students and faculty. And so there will be many arguments on both sides of this. The way the debate will proceed is the government team or affirmative team, which is here on my right, will begin the debate, and then we'll alternate speakers, each with about 6 minutes of time to use through the 8 speakers here. And then we'll have a response from Dr. Maher, who is the University Provost, who will respond to the debate. It's great to have you here. Looking forward to what you have to say about the debate. And then we'll open it up to question and answer from the audience, so pay careful attention. Now we'd like to introduce the debaters, and I guess I'll introduce my class first. All right. So as far as debaters representing on the side of the first government, we have Jason Furman, who's a sophomore communications major, who is from Maryland and wants to hold a successful job in marketing and later own his own business. And he's very happy to be here, engaging in such a controversial subject that takes extensive preparation to debate and admits the final exams and papers, well, that's the truth. So, welcome, Jason. Next, we have Tanisha Evans, who's a junior communications major, and she hopes to attend law school and become a successful lawyer. Tanisha. Then on the opposition, the second opposition, we have Matthew McCabe, who is an English writing major and political science and computer science minor. He's a sophomore from the Philadelphia suburbs, and he will be the managing editor of the Pitt News starting next week. He also plays for the men's ultimate frisbee team at Pitt and attended St. Joseph Prep in North Philadelphia. All right, so welcome back. And last but not least, we have Hillary Pennegar, who's a mechanical engineering major and a studio art minor from Ford City, Pennsylvania. She's a sophomore. And her interests include looking at pictures of cats on the internet, animated GIFs, crafts, Sunoco, being a member of the second opposition, beatboxing, playing outside with her friends, and fog machines. So, welcome.
Okay. Let me just second Steve's comments. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm very happy to see members of multiple classes from the Department of Education taking part. The department has done a lot to try to increase the amount of public performances that it engages in, as this is part of the history of rhetoric and what our discipline is really about. So we're very happy that all of you decided to come. I'm very proud to introduce the students from my class today. All of them have displayed excellent skill in argumentation. And first, on the affirmative side, Brandon Smith, who's majoring in communication and rhetoric. He's very well known now in the class for having a penchant for using visual aids. And also music as a form of argument. So he's engaged in some very interesting forms of argumentation in the class. And his friend on the affirmative side today is Wes Dana, who also is well known for visual argumentation, using the body as a site for argumentation as well. His majors are history and philosophy. So welcome them to the affirmative side of today's debate. Representing my class from on the negative side today, first we have Evan Murphy, who's currently a sophomore. He's a computer engineering and music major, and his interests are fiction and chocolate. I think you can all agree with that. So let's welcome Evan. And last but not least, also representing the negative from my class, Toby Horn. He's a sophomore and a dual major in computer engineering and mathematics. He's president-elect of the Quiz Bowl program. Maybe we'll hear a little bit about that during his speech. I really don't know much about it. And his academic interests include artificial intelligence, neural networks, and robotics. So very interesting. Let's welcome Toby. And without further ado, we'll begin. Are you good at one thing? Oh, okay.
You're already pretty good at knocking, so we want to encourage that. In this form of debate, if you hear an argument that you like, please knock and let the speaker know that that argument you are digging on. Right? This is a good argument. Now, if you hear an argument you do not like, you feel free to hiss the speaker if you feel the argument's bad. Sort of like this, right? So we can practice, right? For your attendance today, I'll give you all an A for the semester. Very good. If you write a 25-page paper about this today. Seems like you don't need any other training. Very nicely done. Without further ado, we'd like to call house to order and hear our first speaker from the government side on the motion today. Let's welcome our first speaker.
We believe the University of Pittsburgh should implement an academic bill of rights that bans viewpoint discrimination. And we're defining viewpoint discrimination as the indoctrination of political and religious views against the faculty and its students. This is a major problem that is happening in universities all over our country, and more stories are being reported every day. For example, Janice Everly, a Pitt student, missed her English class to participate in a fundraising event for victims of Hurricane Katrina. She thought informing her English literature professor of her absence through email would be convenient and painless, but what she received was an email instructing her to rabble-rouse in protest of President Bush. And he responded, "I could give you permission to miss class if you agree to do some of the rabble-rousing I would do at the yard sale yourself," her professor said in the email. Actually sent her this and sent her several more following. She replied that she let us know that she was so mad, she thought she almost cried and didn't know what to do from there and just dropped the class. This should not be tolerated in our university. How can we prevent these incidents? By implementing our academic bill of rights, which bans these kind of occurrences, and students will no longer have to go to class in fear and be intimidated by professors. In our plan, we want to make available all information to students of what they're entitled to. By that we mean how they are to be treated. We're not saying that professors shouldn't give their opinion, or that their opinions aren't important. We're not saying that at all. But it's the derogatory use of the opinions and the abuse of power that we want to prevent. Students come here, liberal, conservative, from different backgrounds and religious views. And they should be able to come to this institution to learn in a positive and open environment where they're free to speak about what they believe, what they want to find or discover, and none of that should be withheld from them. Actually, there were hearings that occurred here at our university, and representatives from Temple University were present. And they actually got a lot out of the hearings and implemented their own system of academic bill of rights in their school. And it seems to work very well for them. We would like to form a similar model, but we want the focus to be on viewpoint discrimination. We have a lot of different studies that are here, and we want to be sure that everyone feels comfortable. A lot of times students are in classes, and once a teacher reveals, how he really hates a certain person or really hates this kind of view, the student is frozen. They're left with either, hey, I guess I can't participate, or maybe I should drop this class, or am I going to get a bad grade because I wrote my paper this way? These should not be worries that our students have. They have enough on their plate as it is. They worked hard to get to a university, and they deserve to have a fair opportunity to express their ideas and possibly learn from alternative ideas.
Do you feel that all viewpoints should be equal, or there's some viewpoints that should be discriminated against because they're not academic?
Well, we're just saying that if you're in an English class, your teacher doesn't need to be talking about what happened on ESPN or what happened on CNN. That's irrelevant to the class. What he feels about what he feels about different representatives in government has no relevance to English.
Don't you feel that kind of interaction with students helps build a relationship between the students and the professors that will maintain a good learning environment?
Yes, I do, and that's the whole point. We want our students to feel comfortable to come to our classes. When they give these negative and derogatory opinions, the students will not go any further. That will limit their experience in the class, or even they won't participate in the class at all. And who's to know, there might be a lot of knowledge that they need from this class, but now they got to go find another teacher that may possibly teach the subject. It's a big inconvenience, and I don't think students should have to deal with that. I'll move forward. Our model would include points that would eliminate viewpoint discrimination in the classroom, but it would also protect our professors as well. It will protect them in the way that they'll be able to speak their views on a one-on-one basis with their student. If the student seeks the teacher or the professor on a certain issue, they can have that discourse. That can happen. We're not saying it shouldn't, but an individual should not be burdened by their instructor's personal or political or religious views. It's not fair. Ultimately, we want our students to have a positive learning environment here at our university. We want to be known for having a safe haven for learning. That's what we want to be known for. Opposition would have you to believe that this is not an issue, that, this is like, water under the bridge, not a big deal, but it is. If it's happening to one individual, it's happening to more. And to ignore it would be to deny the rights of your fellow students. And I'm sure some of you might know other students that leave their classes or are not having a good time in college because they are not being respected. And they have no way to change the situation. And that's where our academic Bill of Rights will bring it. Thank you.
I purchased this bulldog shirt several months ago, and not very much. I don't encounter any opportunities where I can wear it without looking ridiculous, but I thought, what better venue than the English Nationality classroom? So I'm here to argue against the affirmative's position that the University of Pittsburgh should implement this academic Bill of Rights that will ban viewpoint discrimination on students and faculty. If you look at the proponents of this idea, namely this man Horowitz, who's sort of spearheading the movement, and the academic Bill of Rights proposition that he and others have laid out, you'll find it's made up of, you'll find these key words appear, like, they come up very often, these words, plurality and diversity. These documents claim that these are very important values in the university. Although it seems perhaps on surface, since in American society at large, we certainly value a great deal of diversity and plurality, I'm going to claim that actually in the university, the main value is not these characteristics, but rather we value the pursuit of truth in the university. Sometimes plurality and diversity are necessary and encouraged as a side effect of the pursuit of truth, but not as ends in themselves, only as means. So, to quote this academic Bill of Rights, we are not, the university does not actually value the teaching and development of students to help them become creative individuals and productive citizens of a pluralistic democracy. We're here for the pursuit of truth, and society at large is a separate issue. Now, question? Yes, sir.
What does the pursuit of truth have to do with preserving students' academic rights?
Well, the pursuit of truth here is the main function of the university. And so, preserving their academic rights, I suppose you're speaking of, what are some of these academic rights you're talking about?
Those academic rights being that they should not have to be indoctrinated by derogatory opinions that do not relate to the course matter.
Certainly, as I'll elaborate on later, occasionally professors will make mistakes. I'm not arguing that they don't. and they'll be purporting views that are not relevant to their academic material, and they'll use derogatory comments and such. But that is not relevant to the point at large. Now, as I said, viewpoint discrimination is sometimes necessary and important, but it's not the chief value. To explore this point and to examine what it would be like if diversity were the chief value of the university, you just need to consider some examples. I think in every job, discrimination, though it's a loaded word with lots of negative connotations, is extremely important. If you cannot discriminate one candidate from another in any job search, then you have no basis to judge anything. For example, though racial discrimination is a very sensitive topic, and it should be, it would be kind of absurd for me to apply to a theater company and expect to be very well qualified for the part of an African American being a white citizen. Similarly, if I were applying for the position as a babysitter and I held this viewpoint that children were the root of all evil, you might question my competence for the job. To quote a few more relevant examples from a paper put out by the American Association of University Professors, the Committee A, writing on this academic Bill of Rights, it would seem that if diversity and pluralistic university were the chief values, then a political theory department might be required to, might be obligated to bring in professors who profess Nazi political theory, right? Or the chemistry department may be required to bring in individuals who teach the phlogiston theory, of heat, which if you're not familiar is sort of a rejected chemistry principle that there is some real tangible substance which makes things combust. Now, as I said, sometimes intellectual diversity, pluralistic university are very important. But in these cases, I think we already have the mechanisms in place to safeguard against these. I think that these kinds of mistakes that professors sometimes make, where irrelevant viewpoint discrimination is made, is best left up to the peer review of other professors and the rest of the professoriate. I think the chief issue that I'd like to leave you with here is that we have sometimes the university is an academic place, and we have the proponents of this idea coming in to try to attempt to attack a political problem with political weapons. And we need to fight the political issues in the university. We need to resort back to the academic palette where it's strong.
Pretty much this argument comes down to one thing. I want you to knock in the audience if you agree with this. The University of Pittsburgh is a great institution. There's some reasons why. We have smart, highly motivated students. We have a wonderful communication department. We have this lovely British nationality room in which to argue. And we even have the Provost who will attend our debate that we have tonight. Now, saying that the University of Pittsburgh is a great institution, there is one thing that is keeping it from staying at a high level of excellence, and that is because we currently do not have an academic Bill of Rights that bans viewpoint discrimination, which will protect our my colleague earlier, our Prime Minister, had stated that this is a serious issue because we have students that are dropping out of classes just because a professor feels that they should put their viewpoint out there that doesn't even relate to the course topic. She brought up the example of Janice Lieberman, and that was a student here at Pittsburgh that felt that she had to drop out of class because she had no avenue, because she felt that she had to drop out of class because she had no avenue to maneuver and protect her rights. Now we're saying that this academic Bill of Rights would do that. How it would do that? Pretty simply, it will have specific statements that define what viewpoint discrimination is, and it can be in your student handbook. Currently, how many people right now know what is in their academic rights here at Pittsburgh? Now we're saying that with this academic Bill of Rights, it will create a greater access to students. They won't feel intimidated that they feel like there's no way to protect their rights. My colleague also brought up that having this academic Bill of Rights will have a positive learning environment. And by this, they won't feel that the professor is coming at their views in a hostile manner, especially in classes that it doesn't even relate to. An example that I found is that if a professor were to, let's say, discuss their feelings on the president-elect or the election, and you're in a biology class, that's not the appropriate avenue to do that. The opposition would have you to feel that having this academic Bill of Rights would shield then a good learning environment where controversies can be debated back and forth. But we say that that's where office hours are for. If you want to discuss a topic that is not related to the current class that you're in during that class period, that's when you go to your teacher during their office hours to discuss those things. Thank you. Now, my colleague also brought up that an academic Bill of Rights has been instituted at Temple University from the hearings that were held here in Pittsburgh. And we feel that the University of Pittsburgh should follow Temple along with that. They have a model where they list out different principles that will protect the students. And now we're saying we should do the similar thing and just make sure that it focuses on viewpoint discrimination. And so students from all over campus can know exactly what the rights are, where to go if they have a complaint, and what process they need to go through. The opposition would have you to think that, no, this isn't a great enough problem that an academic Bill of Rights is needed for it. But we say that one student is too many. How would you feel if you were in a class that a professor was having religious or political views that didn't relate to the course topic, and you felt harassed and you didn't want to be in that class? We say that the academic Bill of Rights would help protect you from that. What you would go through is what we're proposing is a simple committee where you can list your grievances. Now, the opposition would also have you think that currently the status quo is fine enough. But we're stating that it's not. As we've seen, not too many of us do know of the avenues we can take when we're indoctrinated by those religious and political views that do not relate to that course. Now, also what we are saying, in conclusion, is that viewpoint discrimination is a serious problem. As I've said, one person is too many. Now, the academic Bill of Rights we're proposing will solve this problem by making it accessible to students and outlining exactly what the rights are protected for students. And now the academic, if we implement the academic Bill of Rights, we are saying that this will make our institution better in excellence. Thank you.
participating on the negative side today. I first want to take some time to thank everybody for coming here, the Provost for coming here. You being here really shows that, I mean, maybe you care about your creative argument class, but I like to think that it means that, you know, you care about the issue of academic freedom, because this is really something, as you know, as an academic community, as a university, it affects us all. And I think this debate is very important. I think it's very interesting that the affirmative team should bring up that not a lot of students in the university know their rights already. Because I think that if you were to go, as I did, to the student handbook and saw what rights were already in place to protect us from the issues of academic freedom, you would see that as things stand now, we are very well protected against these kinds of things that the negative team brought up. To quote from the Code of Conduct and Student Rights, the students have a right to engage in discussion, make inquiries, exchange thought and opinion, publish and exchange findings and recommendations, to speak, write, or print freely on any subject in accordance with federal state constitution, subject to the right of the university to make reasonable rules. That to me sounds like academic freedom. If I'll take the question.
Now, you're saying, you're talking about academic freedom, but what about viewpoint discrimination for students?
I'll address that in just a moment. Thank you for your question. Additionally, students have the right to protest, the right to be free of discrimination, and they have the right to petition or address a grievance arising from negligent, malicious, or irresponsible actions on the part of the university, the university community. Which means that if I was wrong, if my academic freedom wasn't breached, I have the right to go through the process outlined by the university to redress these issues. Again, the dispute policy is also outlined in the student handbook, and it plans out very, carefully what you should do if this should happen to you, and who you should go to. You should talk to your professor, you should talk to your department chair, and if that doesn't work, go all the way up to the associate dean. I mean, the Academic Bill of Rights sounds good, but there are already policies in place that take care of this issue. We don't need something on top of it. But the affirmative team still might say, what we have is not enough. Why not have this academic Bill of Rights? I mean, it sounds really good, right? A Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights that defends our rights, and how can you stand there and be against enumerating and defending our rights? But the thing about the academic Bill of Rights is it hurts our rights more than it helps us. Having this as part of part of university procedure is really a negative thing, and is going to take away from our rights more than it defends them. What the Academic Bill of Rights is going to do is it's going to introduce politics into the classroom. It's going to allow the state government to come in and say, is there viewpoint discrimination? What should professors be allowed to say? What shouldn't they be allowed to say? The purpose of academic freedom is to keep this from happening. It's to protect the university from intervention from the state and the church. It's to give professors the right to speak what they need to in their classes and teach how they see fit. And to kind of outline, I'll take the question.
Are you saying that professors should be held accountable for their actions?
I think I've already addressed that point by saying professors are accountable. The students can always bring grievances against their professor. They can go through the system in place and hold their professors accountable.
You just said that professors should do whatever they want with their clothes, right?
I don't feel that I said they should do whatever they want. I think they should be able to have the freedom to do what they need to do within reason. Of course, I can't advocate professors being able to teach whatever they want, to say whatever they want. That's ridiculous. But within reason, I think that professors should be a good deal of freedom. To kind of show how the Bill of Rights hurts us, I'd like to address one of the articles which says that the course's major responsibility, exposing students to the spectrum of significant scholarly viewpoints on the subjects examined in their courses is a major responsibility of faculty. Faculty will not use their courses for the purpose of political, ideological, religious, or anti-religious indoctrination. And that sounds like a really good idea. It sounds like a solid idea. But when you think about it, what is political indoctrination? What is religious indoctrination? I mean, we're trying to outline what professors can't say, but indoctrination can cover a wide variety of things. If I'm a fan of slasher flicks, really violent movies, and I'm a professor, maybe I want to share that with the class, but is that indoctrinating them to a certain viewpoint? There's a lot of gray area there, and having this kind of language in a Bill of Rights, it leaves a lot of room open for lawsuits, for a lot of negative things that's going to restrict our professors, hurt their ability to teach. As I kind of brought up in my question, I also feel that professors being able to speak about things outside of their the material of their class helps build a relationship with their students. As a professor, you want to kind of know your students. You want to kind of share things with them outside of your class so you can build a productive learning environment. I mean, a professor teaches you a lot of things, not just what his class is about. You know, I just like to get to my last point. You know, they brought up a very negative example of what happened in the Zebra League, and I feel that should not happen to a student. I agree with the affirmative team. That's the kind of things we need to stop from happening in this university. But I've kind of had experience with this too, when in high school, you know, a professor of mine, a biology professor in fact, taught us intelligent design, and I felt my academic freedom was violated. I feel like this is the kind of stuff that shouldn't be taught in school. But rather than that being a negative experience, for me that was a very positive experience. I learned how to deal with people with different viewpoints. I learned to research my own viewpoints so the next time we brought up in class, I could stimulate the discussion, I could move on. So rather than this always being a negative thing, it's going to be a very positive thing for students, for professors to be able to bring up their viewpoints. And I agree with the negative team. When taken to the extreme of hurting the students, it should not be allowed. But I think, in closing, the academic bill of rights will do more harm than good and should be prevented from passing the university. Thank you.
First off, to go along with the trend of everybody that's spoken before, thanks again for coming. It's great to see you all. I'll cut it out there. My name is Wes Dana. I'm a senior history and philosophy student here at Pitt. And in my time here, there's one thing that really stood out, and I think it's directly related to the conversation, to the debate that we're having here today. In one class, it was actually a summer course. We met 3 times throughout the summer, but this one thing that the professor said when we started our course maybe affected me more than anything on this issue. He came in, he introduced himself, and now I paraphrase, if I say anything that allows you to guess by the end of the course what my religious or political affiliation is, I will have failed you guys as a teacher. It was a political science course. Politics comes up a lot. The issues we went over ranged from the wars that happened hundreds of years ago to the very war that was happening today in Iraq. He was an excellent professor. We learned a lot from him. And with that statement, which he held true to throughout the semester, it really instilled something in me. He taught, he was effective, he got his points across, he taught us the material that we deserved, that we entered into when we made that contract with students to pay this university, to make us into the university students, to make us into the world students, the global students that we want to be when we come out of here. We expect to be educated, we expect to be prepared for a world that isn't always what we want, isn't always what we'd like it to be. It's supposed to prepare us to, in a way, academically do battle with the things that we disagree with, to stand up for what we believe is right. And that professor, that kind of professor, and that attitude, which is all too rarely found here, or at any university, is really what's going to give us that as students. We have examples of complaints. We know that students have had problems with this kind of thing before. It might be 1, it might be a couple thousand. It might be just here at the University of Pittsburgh, or it could be throughout the United States of America, or throughout the world for that matter. It was brought up before, what is indoctrination? And let's look, say, to the south, maybe the University of Havana. Down there, they teach a little bit differently than we do up here. Maybe you can draw some parallels, unfortunately, but it's a little bit different. You learn the party. You learn the things that the party supports, and you don't learn that giant country to the north, they do some good things too. Now, that's not really our thing to debate upon. We're not the University of Havana, for good or for ill, and what we're debating here isn't that issue necessarily, but it is the issue of whether we start or continue going down that path. To the point where, sure, if our faculty is mostly aligned with one political party, we're going to hear a little bit more of that. We're going to get the attitude, we're going to get the statements, the opinions, and maybe facts from one side of the aisle. And on one hand, for some of us, especially as we get older, maybe we get more experience, or maybe some of us had to go through a high school where our views were constantly at odds with the people we were in class with. Maybe we're ready for that. Maybe we're ready to come into the university and say, these are my beliefs. I'm ready to defend them. If there's a professor that says, oh, you voted for that guy, I think you're an idiot. Maybe that's something we're ready to take. But I think in the majority of cases, most students here, or at any university, they're not ready to take that.
They're not ready to sit there and participate in a class where they know that their opinion, their beliefs, whether it's religious, whether it's political, whether it's social in general, that they know that might not be received well, that they might not have an open forum. They might not be able to stand here today and say what they feel. This is what we want from a university. We want to be able to learn to take whatever beliefs we choose to form throughout our class time here and stand up in front of people and say, this is what I believe. And I know that this is a world where there are conflicts. This is a world where there are disagreements. There is discrimination. But I went to the University of Pittsburgh. I came from a place that respected that.
You mentioned that at a university you might encounter a situation where you're outnumbered in terms of party. Maybe there are more Democrats than Republicans. If politics is irrelevant to the university, why would a statistic like this really matter at all?
Could you rephrase the end of that? Just
Sure. Why would a statistic like this, the number of members in a party in class, matter at all? Politics is...
It should. I agree with you. And I think that's part of it is, like I said, with the class that I took, it doesn't matter. Say, the professor's Republican or Democrat. The majority of the class is the same. It shouldn't matter. We are in that class to learn the facts. We're in that class to learn about the trends of history. And unfortunately, or fortunately, when we look at history, it's not always black and white. There's two sides to every story. One side might be ridiculous, such as I think one of the groups mentioned, say someone that is supporting the Nazi ideals. It might be a little bit ridiculous. We might not agree with it. But if it's something that's held academically, if it's something that can be supported by academic research, it's something that we need to know exists. We don't have to go into a class and be indoctrinated. We have to go into a class, we expect to go into a class and be taught. If it's something we like, great, we take it, we build it into who we are. If it's something we don't like, we leave it at the door. But we know that it's out there, and we're ready for it when it comes up in real life, at a dinner conversation, at a foreign policy summit. When something comes up, it's the stuff that you learn now. It's the person that you're formed as at the university level that makes you ready to deal with the good and the bad, the agreement and the disagreement. And I really think that when it comes down to it, that's what's important. The Bill of Rights that we suggest here, it's very vague. If you read through Horowitz's example, there's not a lot to disagree with. There's not a lot of things, as you guys mentioned, you're not going to look at something and say that, wow, this is really a bad thing to take into account. So this is what I feel, and this is my experience as a senior here at the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you very much.
Hey, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Now, I have a small problem with what the government's been proposing. Now, you keep speaking about this plan that you have, sort of like the Temple University idea for what they're doing to deal with academic freedom. But I wonder, how do we really enforce it? And I know it's not really my place to suggest this as the opposition, but I think George Orwell might have a pretty good suggestion, which would be the thought police, because I think they do a really excellent job, like seeing whether professors really are indoctrinating bad ideas into their students, communism. Speaking of communism, David Horowitz, who wrote the Academic Bill of Rights, he also was a communist and a supporter of the Black Panthers. I'm just saying. But now, what you're suggesting is that we need a change. However, I personally don't feel that there's a problem with the status quo. You're saying that there's all these examples, mostly just Jennifer Everly over and over again, but I really don't think that that's as much of a problem as you're saying. Now, I can't say that there are never abuses to a professor's power, because there's abuses to power in all sorts of aspects of human life. But I realize also that professors follow a certain code of moral and professional ethics that typically keeps these things from happening. And should something happen, like what happened to Ms. Everly, there is a procedure for these sort of grievances at the University of Pittsburgh. And I feel that there's no problem. And in fact, I'm sorry to point you out, the Provost, Maher, said himself, "We've not been able to find a case that would involve a student who's asserting that he or she had been discriminated against in the graded class on the basis of political opinions. He continued to say that most of the academic integrity complaints were based on cheating on exams, and they have yet to have one student complaint, not just at the main campus of the University of Pittsburgh, but at many of the branch campuses as well. They have yet to find a complaint given from a student about being mistreated for their political opinions. Not right now, I'm sorry. But realizing that there are certain abuses of power by professors, maybe you do want to implement this student bill of rights. Okay, so let's say you do. It will make things a lot worse than they already are. Now, if we do what you're suggesting, then there would be a notion of checks and balances on particular courses. Typically, you're not talking about the hard sciences because it's hard to argue things there, but I don't think that the hard sciences should be discredited because in geology, there's, although a seemingly small argument, but some people argue that plate tectonics don't exist and that the Earth is just expanding, and that's why things change, and that's why we're not just a supercontinent. Now, if we were to raise both sides of every subject, would we have to raise this idea? And how do we advance in a subject if we're talking about both sides of an idea? In a women's studies class, most of them are based upon the idea that gender is socially constructed. Now, if we have to accept the idea that gender may also be biologically constructed, doesn't that undermine the women's studies course completely? And if we were to have all these checks and balances, and maybe not necessarily the thought police, but some sort of procedure that would keep professors on their toes, wouldn't it chill good teaching? Wouldn't teachers be nervous to say what they really want to say in their classes? And knowing that the University of Pittsburgh has this sort of Bill of Rights in place, wouldn't it also hurt recruitment at the university? How are we going to get professors that come in and see that they can't necessarily speak their views? And not only are you suggesting that it'd be hard for it would be hard to recruit people like this, but once we do, doesn't this very Bill of Rights, doesn't it conflict with the actual Bill of Rights?
Question.
I'm sorry, no. But this is actually giving us not more academic freedom, but less freedom. We as students will be unable to learn things from our professors who are learning not only in what they were taught or what they learned after several decades of teaching, but will be unable to learn things that they've learned in their field that may or may not be on the syllabus. Sometimes we need to get off topic. The day after 9/11, wasn't it important to talk about what happened that day? And I'm pretty sure that that was in little to no syllabuses at the time. But like I said, there's no problem with the status quo, and if we really did enforce your student Bill of Rights, it would make things a lot worse than they already are, and I don't think that that's a good model at all. Thank you.
My name is Brandon Smith. This whole issue is very simple. A great education is based on diversity. And without something in place to ensure that diversity, then it won't be protected, and it opens things up for discrimination. When people feel that they cannot express their views and learn from each other, then the majority will overrule the minority. And things such as racism and sexism will prevail and will continue. Now, two sides of every argument is very good as how we solve things, why we're having a debate today. Without having two sides, then you open things up to say like dictatorship, and people feel discriminated, and and all of things like this. I don't think our opponents support dictatorship. I hope not. Let me give you an example. Me and my teammate, we're completely different. I'm a liberal, he's a conservative. And there's other visual evidence of our differences. And I feel we make a very good team. We have been in class with him, and we've been on, me and him teamed up on every debate so far. And because of our diverse backgrounds, we have come up with a well-rounded argument, which has, I believe, made us prevail. Also, we are paying for an education. We are here, we're spending our money. Should we not get the best that we can from our education? Should we not learn from each other? Should we not be around and fear our own opinions? Can I get a knock on that one, please? Y'all are spending thousands of dollars, and you should be able to learn what you want to learn. I don't know how many of y'all saw the movie Accepted, but Accepted was a college for the students, by the students. They got to learn exactly what they wanted to learn, and they were so happy for it. All right. Don't you want to be happy? Also want to point out that our opponents do not take our questions because they are afraid of the other point of view. I don't think that's good. I mean, to me that means they don't have a strong argument, that they cannot defend their argument. You can swing once. Now, she also made a point about, not recruiting based on the teachers not being able to express their views. We're not saying they can't express their views. We're just asking that they also research the other side of the views, or all the views on the issue, and teach not only their own views, but all views on it, all education on both sides. Yes, I will take your question because I value your point of view.
Don't you think that the language expressed in your academic bill of rights could be used to keep professors from expressing themselves and talking to students?
No. All we're asking is a well-rounded curriculum. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking people to shut up. We're asking for people to, I'm going to say what I got to say about, my view. And here's another view, a point from other people. That's all we're asking. So that people can see the entire issue from all sides, not have a one-sided view on things that causes people to discriminate and they think one-sided. Come on, I really got some more questions. Come on, go ahead.
Don't you think though that some sides or some arguments should be discriminated against, like racism? Should, like, the racists be discriminated against? Shouldn't people who endorse slavery be discriminated against? There are some viewpoints that we do not want to endorse as a university.
Man, no matter what viewpoint it is, we can learn from it. Without racism in our culture, we have not learned that the value of brotherhood. We have not learned all of it. Sometimes you must go through bad things to learn lessons of life. So, in answer to your question, no. Yeah, something. For sure. Well, I think I'm finished.
Hello, my name is Matt. Thank you again for coming. You've heard a lot of things today from a lot of different viewpoints. You've heard a lot of talk about different ways the Bill of Rights affect you. And maybe you've heard a plan, it's really not clear. But let me clear the air for you and tell you that this debate is about three things. It's about Plato, it's about Don Imus, it's about the thought police. Bear with me, and you'll understand where I'm going. Plato. Who are some of the best teachers in the world? Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, John Locke, Galileo. Did they have an academic Bill of Rights? Does the university you're in right now have an academic Bill of Rights? Yet we all knocked when we said Pittsburgh is a great university. What makes us great with this academic freedom? This issue that we're trying to address is not a significant issue. If Janice Everly seems to be the only problem, we can create a separate school for her and her issue will be addressed, because she's the only name apparently that's been thrown around in this case that's had a problem. She can go through the deans. Yes.
What about the students that are intimidated and have not been able to feel that they can come forward, other than Janet?
Well, thank you for that point. It's a very good point. Those students can go through the steps laid out by my colleague, and the evidence that there is not such a problem is that if there were more of these problems, when everybody said, well, we don't know what these procedures are, and more people have problems, they'd seek out the procedures and know them. So evidence that no one in this room knows the procedures is evidence no one's ever had to look for them or use them. Yes.
Now, if they're scared, no matter if they know the procedures or not, if they're scared, you feel they still won't go to the proper authorities about the issue.
Thank you for your question. It's another good point. I think if they're scared, they're still able to go into the computer lab downstairs, Google the Provost website, and look through the steps that they have and the assets they have on their side to address such an issue. And the fact that no one knocked in this classroom, how many people are in here? About 50 people? And not one person's had a problem? 0% of this class has the need for an academic bill of rights at this moment. So the second issue would be Don-Imus. As we alluded to before, some viewpoints are okay to discriminate against. I don't want Don-Imus teaching my class. I don't need him teaching my class. His viewpoint is one that I'm okay with discriminating against. There are other thoughts that don't need to be included. Racism, sexism, Hitler. We don't need a class called Thinking as Hitler Would. Is that really going to value my degree more? I highly doubt it. The third issue is the thought police. We know that there isn't a need for this plan. We know that the fundamental basis of it, the questions of whether viewpoints should be discriminated is wrong. But let's say this plan were implemented. What would this university look like? As we alluded to before, it would be the thought police. We would see people in every classroom. We'd see professors who would barely talk at all. They'd hand you a syllabus and say, read this book, but only certain chapters. I don't want to be accused of indoctrinating you. Do we really want that? Do we really need that? Did Plato or Aristotle or all these great, amazing teachers need that? If I had the chance to be taught by John Locke or one of Plato or Aristotle, would you take it? I would take it, even though I wouldn't be guaranteed that Plato would only speak on philosophical terms. I certainly would want to hear how he feels about politics, about how society should be constructed, other than, his views on reality. Is a very educated and intelligent person, and I don't want his views to be constrained to exactly what's on his syllabus. So, there is no need for the plan. The plan in its pure basis is fundamentally unsound. And if it were to be implemented, the results would be far worse than what we have here today. They said earlier how great this debate is and how wonderful it is, thank you, that we can have this debate today. And there's a need a Bill of Rights to be able to have this debate. But we're having this debate right now and we don't have a Bill of Rights. So what does that tell us about the academic freedom in this room? That we have the power to do what they would like to enable us to do by implementing their plan? It doesn't seem very logical to me. Their plan results in a more constrained future, in one where professors have to worry about what they say, where academic freedom is not embraced. They talk about embracing the plan that Temple University has and then we should follow their plan. I personally believe that Pitt should not follow any other university's plan. That Pitt should lead the way and show the rest of the universities in the country what academic freedom looks like. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's been a very fun time watching 8 students sort of give us their opinions, let us know how they feel about this idea of the academic Bill of Rights. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. James Maher, who is the Provost and Senior Vice Chancellor of the University, which means he's our Chief Academic Officer of the University. Dr. Maher was appointed Provost and Senior Vice Chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh in July 1994. Following 3 years as Chair of the University's Department of Physics and Astronomy and 24 years as a member of the faculty. He earned his master's and doctoral degrees in physics from Yale University and his bachelor's degree from the University of Notre Dame. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Maher. Let's all
things I want to say. First is I want to congratulate the debaters and all of you who are engaged in this enterprise. I think it's extraordinarily important to your education. I know when I was 14 years old, my father took me aside as I was about to begin high school. He said there are two important things you need to know about American education. One is that even though for the rest of your life, no matter how good you are at what you've done, you won't get appropriate credit from your boss or whoever you are accountable to if you can't write down a clear description of your last year's accomplishments in a half page. And yet, despite that fact, the educational system in the United States does an absolutely rotten job of teaching writing, and you're on the school paper. And then he said, and it's also true that if you can't stand up and give a presentation that gives a good account of your side of an issue or the results of your work for some previous project, that you're not going to succeed. And bad as the American educational system is in teaching writing, it doesn't even try to teach speaking. So you're on the debate team. Well, I've been playing on the football team and nothing else. So we had one of those meaningful father-son discussions. And I was on the school paper and I was on the debate team. And it did so well for me that I did it to my own children. And watching me do it to my own children made my wife, when she went back to school after the children were in junior high school and decided she'd get an MBA, before she entered business school, she took this course, and it did her a lot of good too. So it's good that you're doing this, and I think it's very important for your education. And I congratulate all of the members of the two debate teams for the work they've put into this. And I think you'll find years from now that the experience you get standing up and making your best argument and learning to express your views in public will stand you in very good stead. Secondly, I would like to say something about the topic of the debate. And here, I don't want to be taking sides between the two teams. I think you've all tried very hard to make your case, and you've been assigned a case, of course. You may or may not agree with everything you said. You just made the best arguments you could. But let me say a little bit about this academic freedom, the aspects of academic freedom that come into this academic Bill of Rights. Academic freedom is itself a very broad topic and an important one, but I don't want to take anything like the time I would need in order to do justice to the whole topic. On this issue of Professor Horowitz and the academic Bill of Rights, first, I think if you study the student handbook, now I haven't studied the student handbook itself, I've looked at the university policies that underlie the student handbook. You might want to look at those if the student handbook doesn't appear to say what I'm about to say it says. But all of the positive points of Mr. Horowitz's academic Bill of Rights are, in my opinion, already embodied in the University of Pittsburgh policies that are described somewhat less formally in the student handbook. And we make a special point of giving every Pitt student that handbook during freshman orientation, because we want everyone to know what the rules are, what their rights are, and what their responsibilities are. Every faculty member has a copy of the faculty handbook, and it has those same policies embodied in a way where they know their rights and their responsibilities. If the professor who the student Janet Everly was complaining about really did what she was alleged to have done, that would be something that would, the professor, if the professor wants to defend what she did, she would have to do it in terms of the syllabus of the course, which includes a statement of purpose of the course, and that defense of the purpose of the course would be the only basis on which she could defend what she said to that student. Now, Faculty and students will frequently disagree over whether an issue is relevant, over whether an opinion expressed was intimidating, on whether the grade of the student was inappropriately affected by something the student said or appropriately affected. And everybody has rights. So you have to have a process. And that's true of so many things in human life. There has to be a process to adjudicate arguments when there is a disagreement over whether or not someone's rights have been violated. And it's very easy to get into a situation where both the faculty member and the student feel that their rights are being violated. The net effect is that if people won't use the process, then you can't resolve the problem. We've never had a student bring such a complaint. If there is a case where there appears to be a good complaint, we've got to use the process. Now I know that that's hard on many students. It takes courage to invoke the process, but I don't know how in a country like the United States, where we do have such a diverse range of viewpoints on so many issues, I don't know how to defend people's rights if they won't use the process. There's nothing in that Bill of Rights that isn't already a right here at the University of Pittsburgh. As far as I can tell, this Janet Everly case came up after the testimony that I was quoted as giving. As of that time, no one had used the process, and as far as I know, she hasn't used it to this day. It's just been in the Pitt News. The process involves lots of protection for the person bringing the complaint. But it does, you do have to be willing to use the process. I understand people not being willing to use the process, but that would be a problem under an academic Bill of Rights anyway. There's got to be a process, and you've got to be willing to use it. Secondly, the committee that had the hearings here from the state legislature admitted at the end of the hearings that our procedures and our processes were in fact up to the standards that they thought should be applied. Temple had to go home and rewrite theirs, but we didn't have to go and rewrite ours. So when you're hearing about Temple putting this in, that's just that theirs weren't up to the standard we had already met. And the counsel to that committee was a person that Professor Horowitz's organization had inserted in the process, and he'd been made the counsel of the organization, and he said that our processes were good enough. Finally, why don't we just pass the academic Bill of Rights as long as we do all this already? The worry we have is the exact wording. We do not mind the sentiment. We endorse the sentiment. We endorsed the sentiment back 20 years ago. The problem is the detailed wording. And that's where you can get into worries about Professor Horowitz's intentions and whether or not we would have the thought police moving in on us if we would embrace his particular wording that he's calling the academic Bill of Rights. So we're not talking about whether we should have an academic Bill of Rights. I'm asserting we already have one. We're talking about whether we should have Professor Horowitz's academic Bill of Rights. And the worry we have about that Bill of Rights is that the particular wording he's used to say that every topic touched on has to have every possible viewpoint represented is maybe manageable. I'm not sure it's ever manageable, but it may be manageable for a survey course, for the introductory course on a given subject. But you could not have advanced courses that went into detail on any one particular school of thought, because it would be illegal to have any discussion of any school of thought without having equal time for all the others. So it would really eliminate a lot of what we consider to be vitally important advanced courses, where we let the student choose which course the student will take, which means the student is deciding which school of thought to pursue more. And that's the main worry about Professor Horowitz's version of the Bill of Rights. So thank you for listening to me. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. And And I congratulate the debaters again. I think you did a fine job of standing up and presenting yourself.
Okay, so now we'll have an open question and answer session. And we have a few people who I think have already been sort of waiting to step up and ask some questions. Please direct your questions either to one of the debaters or to Dr. Maher. He's offered to stay and answer any questions you have about what he had to say as well. So please do direct a question his way if you have one for him. And we'll recognize any questions at this point. So go ahead. Yeah.
My first question is to the first term. You guys brought up this argument that there are certain places where politics and religion are just completely irrelevant to certain courses. So my question to you, like for example, I think you know biology courses and things like that. My question to you then is the Bill of Rights, and would you only apply it to, like, for example, political science or religious study courses because that's where these are only relevant? And you also brought up that also, like, if you want to get into something that just like you have office hours, would that then apply if you're having a personal discussion with one of your professors?
What we meant by that was just that no, during the office hours, the academic Bill of Rights would apply. It's more as when you have class time and it's meant to discuss a certain topic, whether it be biology or whatever the course may be. But we're saying that it should be related directly to that course and not a religious rant on something that you're talking about more after yourself.
I'm just adding to what he said. It was more so to protect the student from these derogatory uses of their opinion. That is the primary focus of the bill. I mean, of the academic rights.
Sure. Let me do one more, and then someone else wants to jump in. Please.
Okay. This is actually for the 19th, and you all brought up this idea that there's already a policy in place. But my question, and you all also mentioned that no one has used it yet. So my question to you then is, even though it seems that no one has used it, there still seems to be a problem though, which is why I think we're having the debate today. So do you at all feel that perhaps maybe the current policy is in any way inadequate or too intimidating for students to use it, being that no one has really made a formal complaint, but yet there still seems to be an issue?
I'll take that. I think the only difference that I would suggest is that maybe more publicizing it more. But I feel like if I had a specific issue with me personally, like I said, I would go to their website, furiously clicking like how can I get back? This professor totally shafted me. What can I do? But I think the way it is now also serves a purpose that whereas if it were overly publicized and everyone knew about it, somebody, I got a B- and I wanted a B+, let me see what I can do about it. Whereas now it's just if you're severely angered about it, you can see about it.
Just to add to that, it's not hard to find these things. I did a little research this afternoon, probably it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to find both the student handbook, the student code of conduct, and the dispute policy. So it's not difficult to find information.
If I could add one word to that. It is, and I realize I'm probably responsible for some of the misunderstanding when I said that the policy has not been used. The policy as it stands has probably been used many, many times. It's certainly been used by students who felt that they were being discriminated against on the basis of either race or gender or religion. It's not been used very often, as far as we can tell, at any level in the process by anyone who felt they were being discriminated against for their political views, which was the main issue in the case that you've been talking about. The reason that I can't cite one case that's been used is one that would be of interest to you if you ever want to bring such a case. The first several levels of the process retain no records. So if you go to the department chair or the professor and say, this is happening and I don't like it and I think I have a right to object, there is no record kept unless you choose to take it higher. Most professors have read the faculty handbook and they know perfectly well that if they're teaching a biology course and they grade you down because they're a Democrat and you're a Republican, that they're going to lose when you take it to the dean. So they're going to make sure it doesn't get to the dean. You go to them and you say, look what you're doing. They're going to back off. So I don't know how many cases have been begun. I do know that there have been no cases that the student felt were worth escalating up to the level at which records are kept, which would be the dean's level.
Questions? Yes, Kate.
This is for the government. Anybody can answer. And it's from the point of view of somebody who is a low-level instructor to become a professor. That these issues with regard to discrimination seem to be focused around interpretation of the way in which somebody says something, right? And so here's my concern. Maybe you can speak to this. Say on my private time, I'm off at a rally. God only knows what it is. Imagine in your heads, or don't. For some of you, I know what you're thinking, and it's disgusting. And so you see me there, and then you come into class, and you start hearing that maybe I'm slanting things because of something that you saw me support during my private time. What barriers are there in your support of the student academic Bill of Rights that would be able to protect professors from A, having a private life and believing in things in that private life, and B, interpretations held by students that may be politically motivated themselves?
I would say that we would hope if the academic Bill of Rights is executed correctly, that it would protect you also. That it wasn't in the classroom, it was at your own private time, if a student overheard, that's kind of might mess up the relationship between you and the student if it's offensive, but at the same time you're entitled to your beliefs. Just as long as you weren't ranting and raving and harassing students in the class, we would hope that the academic Bill of Rights would protect you as well in that kind of situation.
And just to add to that a little bit, I think the implications you speak of, I think is a valid concern, but I think it would have to be a very serious implication, an implication that was much more obvious than obscure, that would actually make it to any real level of the student Bill of Rights. I really don't think an implication that, she looked at me this way, I know she was at this rally, and I think she hates me. I don't think that's going to make it anywhere. It's not going to hold water, especially when it goes into the process that this stuff is really proposing.
Other questions? Yes.
Question. All this talk about discriminating against someone because of their religious beliefs or their political affiliation, isn't that already a federal offense, regardless of whether or not a teacher has tenure? Excuse me. Regardless of whether or not a teacher has tenure or a university is public or private? Yes. Either side, Provost.
It's very clear in the faculty handbook that having a student's grade be affected by the opinions the student holds on religion, politics, or by the student's gender or race or ethnic background is unethical behavior on the part of the faculty member. So that there's a very heavy responsibility on the part of the faculty to make sure that when they exercise their responsibility to grade the students in the course, that no such things affect the student grades.
Okay, other questions?